Philip Morris here. Welcome to Impact's Art Segment. Today's guest is Arturo Vasquez. He is the principal of a new design firm, a new architectural design firm in the region, SAS Design, and has been a good friend of the arts. So, Arturo, welcome. Glad you could be here.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, delighted. So, you just started a firm, a specialty. Do you have a? What are you thinking you're doing?
Well, it's a firm that I had started in Boston, where I was for about 22 years, and I'm basically carrying that over here. And I specialize in blending architecture and urban planning because I have a background in urban design. So I've done a lot of work with nonprofits and mixed-use projects, and also schools and healthcare. So bringing that experience to the region, I think, is important.
So, on the broad picture, what do you need an architect for? You know, everything's pre-engineered. I can order it online, have it delivered, and assemble it.
Well, that's a good question. You know, I think architects have not done a very good job of sort of telling the industry and people what the benefit is of what we do. And I think it takes maybe some 12, 15 years to become an architect, and you're trained in how to understand how to put things together, how to understand scale, how to understand context, how to be able to arrange things in a way that makes sense. It's kind of like creating a stage. So you can get an engineer or you can get a contractor to build a stage, but you can't get them to design one. So I think you need really a team, and we're part of that team.
So, a lot of people, I mean, my wife's is one of the first to say, stuff built today's crap.
Yeah.
Why? Why?
Well, I think it's because we have lost our sense of craft. We have lost our understanding of how important it is to know how to work with local materials, how to put things together, and the over-commercialization of materials and ways of construction, I think, have deteriorated what we do and what we put up in the public realm.
What do you mean by over-commercialization of materials?
Well, I think, for example, materials become less and less of quality because of rapid fabrication, and therefore you lose the craft of how things come together, and also using less and less quality materials, or less and less quality raw material to create, say, wood products or even some of the hardier products that you have. And it's really not much more money to get a good quality material. But if you're not working with an architect can explain to a client, you know, the range of materials that have good quality as opposed to a material that's cheap, like vinyl siding, which, you know, doesn't really work.
Right. So tell me, in the capital region, let's flip from the difficult side of the business to the beautiful side of the business. What's one of your favorite buildings here?
Well, frankly, I think it's more of an urban form than a building, Proctors. And it's because Proctors has what you don't normally find. In fact, I think it's unique in the eastern half of the United States, where you have a mixed-use building that has a theater program, that has an internal street, what is an arcade, or in Germany they're called Arkaden, which are everywhere, or in Europe, in London, you have that as a basic form of building and street. And I think that's what I find the most unique about Schenectady and about Proctors as a building form. There's an arcade building in Albany, but it's in a commercial environment, and it's really not part of the city. So here you have the farmers market that occurs on the weekends, and so it all of a sudden becomes really your town center. I think that's fantastic. I think you don't see that kind of building form in the city as much in cities in the United States.
Well, with your urban planning eye, how do you look at the capital region? When you look at it, what do you see? What do you want to do with what you see?
Yeah. Well, I think the capital region needs a sort of whole sense of identity, a sense of how Schenectady, Albany, Troy, Saratoga, and some of the outlying smaller towns that developed over time can be woven together into a single sense of place. And I think because often how we define ourselves is either through political environments or physical disconnections, there is a beauty here. But you really have to kind of go back a few layers and really understand those connections. For example, I like to say how states Street in Schenectady connects with State Street in Albany. If you just follow the former roads that were there before, we moved to the automobile, and we talked a little bit about that. So I always look for that connectivity, that sort of physical relationship. And when I talk to anyone, I say the beauty of this place is really the connection between the various different natural resources that are here and the beauty of the downtowns.
What's interesting to me when I look at the map of the region is that even though these, let's just talk about Troy, Albany, and Schenectady, even though these three cities were competitors in lots of ways, or at least in sort of social ways, they have these direct roads, right? Route 7 goes straight between Schenectady. It's called the Schenectady-Troy Road. Route 5 is Central Avenue, State Street, direct. I mean, direct, straight arrows. But the highway system we built doesn't match that at all. Almost. I mean, it's faster to get some of those places, but in fact, it's indirect.
Right. Well, that happened because at the time that roads were being built, we lost the sense of understanding how to interweave the regional roads or the carriage roads, which move you between towns to a super fast highway. And it has to do with the radiuses of how cars swing around a particular speed. And from our perspective, from an architect and urban designer's perspective, it's because those roads were engineered by engineers. And so they're always looking for the easiest flow, not necessarily how people can actually navigate roads. And if we really look at those guidelines, if we kind of tweak them, you can slow down the movement and the curvature and start to align. What I think is a real problem here, how the regional roads can interface with the local roads and with the highway system. And that sort of intersection is missing. And I think that's a phenomena that I haven't seen in other parts of the U.S. Texas has enormous roads, and the exits, you take an exit like 2 miles away, whereas here you don't really have that kind of opportunity, so you crash into downtown.
I hadn't thought about it, but the urban, when the roads were built, so that's the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, post-war.
Were people even thinking urban design around those roads?
No, actually, urban design wasn't even a discipline until fairly 20 years ago. One of my friends from Columbia came to UT Austin, where I got my training, and he was the first urban design graduate because urban design was not considered a discipline. And there's a distinction between planning, which is two-dimensional, criteria-based information, parking, zoning, all of those things that really are just cartographic, to the third dimension. Understanding how planning becomes three-dimensional is urban design.
Well, wouldn't, what's her name, disagree with you? The Life and Death of the American City?
Actually, she is the hero of those who, grew up with the idea of how to...
What's her name? I'm sorry, our audience knows.
Jane Jacobs.
Jane Jacobs.
Right. And she's responsible for saving a very beautiful place in Boston, which is the North End. Because through urban renewal and that policy, the North End would not have existed. And it does not meet the planning criteria or the roadway engineering criteria. But in that case, neither would Schenectady. So I think because urban design came into being as a normal discipline that sort of supersedes planning, we started to look at cities in a three-dimensional way.
Yeah, because certainly an urban planner would look at the roads that separate Albany from the river and go, stop, this is
that would have never happened.
Right.
And I think that's just a particular policy of the time. Also just, hubris and where we were at the time. And now we're redressing much of that. Look at what they did in Boston with the Big Dig. And if you look for ways for 787, as you talk, to be remediated, there's ways that could happen other than thinking that you have to put the road underground.
So how would this region start to think of itself more as one place? How do you imagine it, linking?
Well, I think you and I had a conversation a while back where if we think about, say, the industries that are the building industries, and we focus less on that and we focus more on our natural resources and on understanding that the Mohawk River and the Hudson meet, and that the resources, the natural resources that we have are the most important component. Then we start to see how things connect together. The fact that you talked about how Troy and Schenectady connect, and how Albany and Schenectady connect. And I think if we start to pay attention at the resources that we have, we kind of start thinking more in terms of the sort of geomorphological understanding of place. I also think that if we focus on the arts as a sort of fundamental glue that can overcome some of the political boundaries that we may have, it begins to give us a sense of the whole place as a place, and begin to sort of turn that image around and celebrate the concept of who we are as a region. I also think if you think about the word capital region in another language, region comes before capital. So in Spanish, for example, capital region is región capital. So it is the region that has a capital stature
Oh, what
to
a
it.
great thought.
So I often look at that because it's how you really see the place from within, and also how you see the place from outside.
Wow, that's really cool. Well, it's something new to me,
Okay.
and then we have to wrap up. But new to me is that these rivers once actually bound us together when the flow of everything was on the river, of commerce, of people, and then only with the automobile, really, or probably with the horse, but with wheeled transportation the rivers became barriers. And so there was this transition in 19th century that in the 18th century probably wasn't so difficult.
Well, the rivers are the lifeblood of a place, right? I think that if we look at just the connectivity between the different modes of transportation, the rivers, the roadways, which are predominantly east-west, that connect the cities that we talked about. If you go through the Thruway, you can see that east-west connection. And we look for that connectivity, and we start to pay attention to beautiful urban forms like the Proctors Arcade and the extension of the Proctors Arcade to J Street and its connection to Main Street and that sort of thing. Those are the things that are magical components that really talk about architecture, talk about transportation, talk about urban planning, and talk about a quality of life that is really what the capital region, I think, is great at.
Arturo, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you,
Delight
Philip.
to talk with you
Thank
always.
you very much.
We'll definitely have you back. This is Philip Morris at Impact with our guest Arturo Vasquez. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you all.